Ash, I thought Jean-Luc Picard was the Borg Queen's greatest rival, but another Star Trek captain proved me wrong. For years, the rivalry between Jean-Luc Picard and the Borg Queen felt like one of Star Trek's most defining conflicts. Their battle wasn't just physical, it was psychological, spiritual, and symbolic. Picard's traumatic assimilation into Locutus of Borg in Star Trek, The Next Generation, seared itself into the collective memory of fans. It was personal. It was painful. It was epic. But recently, my understanding of that rivalry has shifted, because another Starfleet captain emerged, not only as a foil to the Borg Queen, but as a challenger to everything she represented. That captain was Captain Janeway. In many ways, Captain Janeway's rivalry with the Borg Queen in Star Trek Voyager was quieter, less operatic than Picard's tragedy. But in revisiting Voyager, I've come to believe that Janeway, not Picard, is truly the Borg Queen's greatest adversary. Not because she suffered more or fought harder, but because she challenged the Borg at their core and beat them in a way no one else ever did. Picard's war was personal. Janeway's was existential. Let's be clear, Picard's journey with the Borg is unforgettable. When the Borg abducted and transformed him into Locutus, it was an act of violation so invasive it transcended sci-fi tropes and spoke to something primal. In TNG's The Best of Both Worlds, Picard wasn't just assimilated, he was used to betray his crew, murder thousands at Wolf 359, and become a puppet for the enemy. His arc in First Contact brought this full circle, allowing him to confront the Queen herself and reclaim a measure of his identity. But at the end of the day, Picard was a survivor of the Borg. He escaped. He recovered. And as brilliant as he was, he remained reactive to the Borg's threats. Janeway, on the other hand, didn't just survive the Borg. She went into their territory willingly. She took her ship into the Delta Quadrant knowing she might have to face the Collective. She studied them, negotiated with them, manipulated them, and finally, she destroyed them from the inside out. Janeway didn't merely escape the Borg. She beat them at their own game. Janeway faced the Borg on their own turf. In Voyager, Janeway's relationship with the Borg was complex from the beginning. Unlike Picard, who encountered the Borg in Federation space as part of a frontal assault, Janeway's Voyager ended up stranded in the Delta Quadrant, Borg territory. From Season 3 onward, the Collective was a looming shadow over the crew's every decision. Yet Janeway never let that shadow dominate her. In episodes like Scorpion, she made the bold decision to ally with the Borg against a greater threat, Species 8472. In doing so, she forced the Collective to recognize cooperation, a concept they rejected. Even as she stood aboard a Borg cube surrounded by drones, Janeway remained herself. She negotiated, she threatened, and most of all, she refused to be afraid. This is where the contrast between Picard and Janeway is stark. Picard suffered because of the Borg. Janeway suffered in spite of them. The Borg Queen met her match, and it was Janeway. The Borg Queen, as introduced in Star Trek First Contact, is more than a figurehead. She's the personification of the Collective's seductive evil, a voice that tempts individuals toward perfection, assimilation, and submission. With Picard, she tried seduction. With Data, she offered humanity. But when the Borg Queen tried to manipulate Janeway, she failed. Repeatedly. In Voyager's two-part finale, Endgame, Janeway doesn't just defeat the Borg Queen, she outsmarts her in a dazzling display of tactical brilliance, personal sacrifice, and moral conviction. Future Janeway returns in time, sacrifices herself, and infects the Collective with a neurolytic pathogen that destroys the transwarp hub and cripples the Borg for good. This wasn't an impulsive move. It was calculated, strategic, and built on years of first-hand knowledge. Janeway had studied the Queen. She knew her weaknesses. She used them. Picard wounded the Queen. Janeway eradicated her. Janeway challenged the Borg ethos. To truly understand why Janeway was the Borg Queen's greatest rival, we have to examine what the Queen represents. The Borg are about control, uniformity, and obedience. Their promise is false utopia, a place where individuality is sacrificed for efficiency. They believe that difference is weakness and that connection must come at the cost of identity. Janeway represented the exact opposite. She commanded a crew of misfits, Starfleet officers, former Maquis rebels, ex-cons, and even a Borg drone herself. She forged unity not through assimilation, but through trust. She maintained her principles even when it would have been easier to abandon them. She didn't seek perfection, she valued growth, failure, and messy humanity. In taking 7 of 9 under her wing, Janeway didn't just rescue a Borg drone, she rehumanized her. She showed the world that even those indoctrinated by the collective could reclaim their souls. She nurtured Seven's individuality, argued with her, respected her boundaries, and refused to let her slip back into Borg thinking. To the Borg Queen, who saw all individuals as components waiting to be optimized, this was blasphemy. The Queen could never assimilate Janeway. One of the most telling moments in Voyager is the Borg Queen's repeated attempts to emotionally destabilize Janeway. Whether it's threatening Seven, bargaining over transwarp corridors, or even manipulating time itself, the Queen consistently fails to crack Janeway's resolve. Why? Because Janeway's strength isn't just tactical, it's philosophical. She doesn't believe in inevitability. She refuses to accept that the collective is unstoppable. She won't let Seven be reduced to a tool. And unlike Picard, she wasn't haunted by the Queen, she challenged her. In Endgame, when the Queen scoffs, "You think you can just walk into our domain and destroy us?" Janeway's answer isn't bravado. It's calm certainty. Because she already has. By the time the Queen realizes it, the pathogen is in her spine and the hub is crumbling. The Queen wanted control. Janeway gave her chaos. Why Picard's rivalry was never enough. This isn't about diminishing Jean-Luc Picard. His story with the Borg is one of Star Trek's greatest arcs. His trauma-shaped entire series, especially Star Trek, Picard. His psychological torment humanized him, and his rage in First Contact reminded us that even the most disciplined captains could break. But Picard's fight was rooted in revenge. Janeway's fight was rooted in resistance. And that difference matters. Picard wanted to reclaim himself. Janeway wanted to liberate others. She led her ship through Borg space and out the other side. She proved that survival wasn't just possible, it was a statement. She didn't just defeat the Queen in one moment. She dismantled the Queen's ideology over 7 seasons. The legacy of Janeway versus the Borg. Today, as Star Trek, Prodigy brings Admiral Janeway back into the fold, it's clear her influence continues. She remains the only captain to have truly lived with the Borg as an existential neighbor and emerged not only intact, but triumphant. And 7 of 9, now a starship captain herself, carries Janeway's legacy. She embodies everything Janeway taught her: independence, morality, resilience. Picard's encounter with the Borg was a war story. Janeway's was a revolution. Final thoughts. The Borg Queen saw herself as the ultimate evolutionary endpoint, something no one could resist or defeat. Jean-Luc Picard showed her that resistance was possible. But Catherine Janeway showed her that resistance could be victorious. Picard was the Queen's fallen angel, once assimilated, forever scarred. But Janeway? She was the one who walked into the Queen's throne room with her head held high, torch in hand, and burned the whole thing down. So yes, for a long time, I thought Jean-Luc Picard was the Borg Queen's greatest rival. But I was wrong. It was always Catherine Janeway. Picard was the Queen's fallen angel, once assimilated,